This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Tuesday, May 28th, 2019. I'm in Taipei for Computex, and my guests are Don McGuire of Qualcomm and Mishaal Rahman of XDA Developers. So how is everybody feeling?
Really great. Day 3 here. So feeling good.
Good Computex for everyone?
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually heading out tonight.
Yeah,
After all the mobile focused products from Qualcomm, ASUS, ARM, and everyone else have been kind of already taken care of before the show actually started today.
I'm going to call it, for me, so far, the big announcements have really been around Qualcomm. And I mean, as a person who focuses on ultra mobility, right? Not just phones, but like devices that are on the go, whatever the form factor might be. I feel that the news has been that. I mean, we wouldn't talk about ASUS news later because you're not staying for the whole thing, Don.
Right.
But like, walk us through kind of maybe what the intention was with the big announcement here at Qualcomm, and what people should get out of it. Because I kind of have some really good thoughts about the performance and kind of ultra extreme mobility that the platform brings to the table.
Sure. Well, Computex is a great forum to make these types of announcements because historically the show has been very rooted in compute. So whether it's mobile compute or more legacy sort of compute, it's a good audience and a good forum to make these types of announcements and to get this news across. So we were really happy that we were able to intersect with Computex. It's really for Qualcomm. It's really important for us to show the progress of the innovation that we're bringing to market in this category, and that we're continually moving forward. As I think Alex said in his comments in our press conference yesterday, we just started this 2.5 years ago, really sort of moving into the mobile compute space. And in a short period of time, there's been a tremendous amount of innovation, faster than the historic PC sort of ecosystem has moved in the last 25 years.
So let's walk people through this a little bit, because I think people don't understand what we're talking about here at the core is that most people have laptops and two-in-ones that run Windows, and they want to stay on that great platform, right? I mean, there's a lot of Mac users as well, and Apple is certainly working on some sort of ARM-based version of the Mac that has been rumored for a long time. Right. But on the Windows side, primarily Qualcomm and Microsoft got together at one point and said, we need ARM on Windows. And this is not a new idea. The original Surface was an ARM on Windows, Windows on ARM platform, but it didn't run standard Windows and legacy executables. There was no emulation layer. Fast forward a few years. And ARM is, rules the world. I mean, that's obvious. And so people like us that are all technical people are like, when are we going to see laptops that instead of running x86, they're going to be running ARM, but also running Windows properly? Sure. And I think you guys broke into that with the Snapdragon 835 version of the mobile platform. Right. And then, a year later or so, you launched the Snapdragon 850 mobile platform, which I actually have a device here, Lenovo C630, Yoga C630. And I didn't try the 835, but I know that with the 850, you are really starting to get in the realm of like, for light computing, you don't notice much of a difference, even with emulation. Right. And now at Qualcomm's event in Hawaii in December
Tech Summit
last year, 2018, you announced the new platform, the 8CX, right? And then, of course, there's whole 5G stuff. We can talk about that. Right. But the 8CX is really beginning to be positioned as a true competitor, right? Right. And so that's kind of the roadmap so far. Yeah. And it's pretty exciting.
You should come work for us. Well, Miriam, you did a great job explaining the whole roadmap. It's fantastic.
We can talk.
Fantastic. So, you're exactly right. And again, it's showing that progress and that evolution. We had to start somewhere. So we started with 835, but then we quickly understood, got feedback, understood where the issues were, understood where we had to make improvements. And 850 was a nice step in that direction.
And 850 was really the first time you customized more to the kind of mobile computing that's needed for Windows and for laptop and two-in-ones versus the mobile computing that we have on our phones. Right. Which have slightly different requirements, obviously, right?
Absolutely. So it's almost like 835 was sort of a repurposed mobile platform. 850 was a semi-custom. And HCX is built from the ground up, 100%.
I mean, that chip looks like it's a massive for a phone. It would never fit in a phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Well, you got a monster GPU, you got our fastest CPU that we've ever built, right, in this platform, but specifically for these devices.
And it's 7 nanometers.
And it's 7 nanometer.
Which
right?
is the first.
Which is the first.
Chip for a laptop.
Yep.
Or 2-in-1 that is 7.
Yes.
So people are basically, the takeaway here, I think, is people are going to be able to buy very soon, in a year, less than a year.
Yes.
These laptop equipped with that platform, that chipset.
Yeah.
And will not feel or notice any difference in performance, even on apps that are emulated.
Right.
Because you have to emulate. Those of you who might not know what we're talking about, Apple did this transition. They went from a Motorola to PowerPC, then from PowerPC to Intel, and it was a pretty seamless transition. They were the first to show the industry, hey, if you apply yourself, you can do this relatively seamlessly for the users. Yes, I mean, emulation is not ideal, and yes, there's a bit of a performance hit, but at the same time, Microsoft has worked really hard to make it easy for developers to rebuild their apps and programs to run native. Yep. And those are the critical apps like the web browsers and Office. But the other stuff, the nice thing is you can still run that legacy Windows 32 program that you had in 1999 that's custom for your enterprise or something. Right. And that's to me what's got me excited. It's like, eventually Apple did drop emulation support because everybody moved on. Right. But I think you guys are in that early phase right now.
Yeah, right.
And I think it's exciting because what you're bringing to the table is threefold, right? You've got, extreme portability in the sense of like a battery life, connectivity, right? Right. Slim and light because these are fanless systems.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what we saw at Computex, and I would love to know what you think, Mishaal, is we saw performance that essentially overpasses a Core i5 laptop. Right. And that kind of blew me away, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, we announced it at Tech Summit, right? And got everyone excited about the possibility. And then we fast forward about 5.5 months, and we're now showing it. It's actually working, and we're delivering on the promises that we made at Tech Summit. And I'm super pleased with the performance that we're getting. Super happy with the work that we're doing with UL benchmarking to create more benchmarks that are really about user experiences and not about synthetics. This category, this industry has been built upon synthetic benchmarking for 25 years. It means absolutely nothing
to the end user. Now that you're ultra mobile, right?
Yeah.
Like you need battery life, you need instant on, you need LTE or 5G connectivity as soon as you're turn on or as soon as you open the lid, as I like to say. Right. And so those are things that still most x86 based laptops, if unless you've used, like if you compare your phone's behavior to an x86 laptop's behavior, or even a Mac, the Macs are pretty streamlined on x86, that instant on and everything. Right. But even if you do that, you're like, there is a bit of a delay there. It's not huge, but it's there. And your phone is way faster at reconnecting, being on. Yep. Continuing with whatever else it was doing. Right. And I think that's kind of what you're bringing to the table. And it's required some pretty big changes in Windows, right? Because Windows wasn't originally architected for that kind of behavior. No. Like with the lid closed, you can go fetch emails. Yeah. Right? So, yeah. Yeah.
So it's been a nice collaboration. We both have been, both Microsoft and ourselves have been learning both from each other, from the ecosystem, from our OEM partners, from consumer feedback, market feedback, feedback from people like you guys. And it's all been really a nice collection that's helped us move forward. The HCX is an amazing platform. It's going to bring all those initial benefits like the instant on, the always connected, the great battery life, as well as this extreme level of performance that is really sustained performance so that you can do what you want to do in a mobile environment, anywhere, anytime, not based on synthetics, but based on real world sort of use cases. And so we believe it's the perfect sort of intersection for these thin and light 2-in-1 designs for the mobile compute space, right? For this, the only part of the PC ecosystem that's growing, besides gaming, high-end gaming, is this space. So we're excited about it for consumers to start getting these devices in their hands for back to school. We're excited about enterprise. You mentioned, Miriam, earlier about productivity and work, and we showed some numbers on the productivity increases that you can get by having a device that can act like this. Everything from location aware to syncing in the background. It saves time for people. And because people are so used to that from their phones, we've asked ourselves this question forever, which is, why shouldn't you expect the same thing from your PC?
And some people listening are say, well, you can get an x86 laptop with 4G connectivity, and that's absolutely certain. But to me, it's not quite the same because you don't have that fully integrated kind of like, I don't know, it's like your phone. Your phone just doesn't have to reconnect.
Right.
It's still there. It's still on the network. Maybe like dormant, but it's on the network.
Right.
Whereas you really kind of feel like when you have an x86 based laptop that has, you know, connectivity, that it's like, oh, it's got to renegotiate with the network. And now it's like, you know, it's just like that pause you get.
Yeah,
and
it still hibernates because the whole architecture of x86 is about you have to shut down to save battery.
Right.
Right. You have to shut down to save battery because if you don't, your battery's gonna last an hour.
Yeah.
Right. And not even the 4 hours, which is on average what people get out of an x86 machine. So with obviously our platforms, like you mentioned about smartphones, just being aware and being always on and always connected, even it's about low power and about power efficiency. It's about doing all those things and those tasks, but doing it at a very low power, you know, perspective or way so that you don't have to worry about your battery life. So this balance of performance and power is something that we've kind of architected, we've sort of created, we've been messaging out there that you don't have to give up great battery life to have better performance.
Right.
By the way, your device should act like your smartphone. Bringing the best of the smartphone to the PC is lightning strike for those of you out there.
It's right next to us.
Very close to us. Is not just about adding a modem to a machine.
Yeah.
Right. That's not creating an always on.
No, I mean it's an architectural shift, right?
Yeah, it's an architectural.
And I mean, look, Intel can probably do the same, but they just don't have that expertise, right? It's not what they know how to do.
Right.
And I think that to me, and you know, this is, I mean, we're talking about Qualcomm, obviously we've been leading that storm, but I think ARM itself enables all this in a significant way. I mean, of course you have your own custom ARM implementation, which is kind of awesome, is because you've been doing it for a long time, right?
Right, exactly.
But Mishaal, what do you think? What is your takeaway from your experience so far with you know, seeing these benchmarks and everything, especially like we have PC Mark 10. Is that actually announced at Computex as part of this?
Yes.
So UL owns PC Mark now and 3D Mark.
Right.
And they announced a new benchmark, which is much better than synthetic. It shows really real case use. So you're like kind of XDA developers, you guys dig deep into like benchmarks. I want to know, how do you feel like, oh, this is annoying me because I want to know what it's like really happening in the chips? Or do you feel like it's more like, okay, it really helps people because actually they can see what the reality is?
Personally, I'm really excited about the generational improvements I've seen from the 835 to the 850 and now the 8CX, although we haven't had the opportunity to actually play around with them in detail. But as you mentioned, you have to strike a balance between performance and great battery life. And as we've seen, the early reviews of the 835 and 850 powered Windows on ARM laptops weren't too pleasing, I guess, to Qualcomm. I mean, there was definitely improvements to be made, and we're seeing that happen with the 8CX. The actual real world performance that we've seen with like the prototype laptop that was connected to 2 monitors, having Photoshop running, Edge, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, all at the same time. Like that's what we want to see. That's what the average user wants. And we're finally at that point. As
an aside, I'll put in the show notes, there's a video I made that actually shows that happening. The 8CX laptop, a 1080p display connected to 4K displays and doing a bunch of work, and you can see that. You can see how well it performs. Yeah. But you know, for me, what's interesting, you said something interesting. It's true. There's the reviews on the 835 and 850 based laptops where kind of lukewarm. But you know, my travel laptop is a 12-inch MacBook original, right? Which is in the Mac world probably the most underpowered machine you can buy. And so I've adapted for portability. I've adapted to using that machine primarily for my audio and video and photo editing needs to be very lightweight in my use. And I think because of that, taking that workflow to an 850, I've never tried the 835, was manageable because the tools I have, I've learned to scale them for low performance platform. And so I didn't notice a huge difference. Where I noticed a lot of difference with the 850 was a lot of tabs in a non-native web browser. But as soon as I installed Firefox nightly, compiled for ARM64, I felt like I was actually stepping up from my MacBook on the 850 to something that felt more like an old iMac, like, you know? Yeah. And so like I could open more tabs and things were just a little more responsive. And to me, that's the thing. I think that had these reviewers used a native web browser, which really didn't happen until, I mean, I got my review unit like right after December. Bernie hooked me up. And then for the first few weeks, it was like, not very pleasant to use. And then finally sent me the link to the pre-built nightlies. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to try that. And then since then, I've been using it a lot more because actually, like, I feel the performance is what I expect. So if that can happen on the 850, I can only imagine what's going to happen on the HCX.
So one thing I wanted to say on the performance, I'm really not the kind of guy who upgrades his PC every year, buys the latest part, and upgrades, buys a new laptop every year. So I'm coming from like a time where, the old laptops, maybe like 6-7 years ago, ran terribly on like low end hardware. Like Windows didn't run really well at all, and the best bet if you didn't want to spend thousands of dollars was to buy like a Chromebook. Right. And so I've been dealing with Chrome OS for years since then because that's just what I've gotten used to.
Chrome OS, and I want to ask
I love Chrome OS
in a minute.
And that's something I've been looking forward to. Like, finally, will Qualcomm be able to deliver something that we can run a Qualcomm chip on a Chromebook? But now I'm starting to see the HCX is doing so well that maybe I should give Windows another shot. Windows and ARM and the HCX seem to be a match made in heaven. Like, it's powerful enough to where I don't have to resort to Chrome OS just to get that speed. I don't have to suffer anymore dealing with the laptop that doesn't cost $2,000.
Yeah, I think, and that's a great point, Mishaal, on Chrome and Chrome OS and where it's gone. So what we believe is we no longer have a hardware issue. The issue is not hardware.
Right.
You talked about Firefox obviously being recompiled for ARM, and since they released it, it's been amazing. It's really now about software. It's really about creating having the engines and the foundational layers recompiled for ARM. So Chromium, Unity, some of these big engines.
Right, so you announced Unity
we announced Unity here at the show.
Unity is now ARM64 Windows compatible.
Exactly. Woo! Chromium, right?
Yep.
Electron, right? For apps like Slack and stuff. So all those foundational sort of building blocks have now been ported or recompiled. So now the app development community that develops on all those can feel free to, and the work is actually very, very small.
Right.
For the developer to actually do the work. So now we've kind of said, okay, we clear all these hurdles on the foundational layer. App development community, go to town. Like, recompile. It's super easy. It's super fast.
I mean, obviously the cores like Unity and all of those Chromium are obviously makes a lot of sense that they would really push hard on that. Right. But are you seeing like small developers? I mean, okay. I was thinking small, but it's not really small. I'm thinking Adobe. But I'm saying, like, you see other developers that are maybe not as much in the limelight as the web browser providers and the game engine providers jumping on board?
I think we've seen really good progress there. I mean, our focus has always been, on the top 100 apps, that are used by Windows users. And the one thing that's great about Microsoft is they have all this great telemetry data. So they know exactly what users are doing, what they're using. And so that's been a guiding light for us to go after, instead of trying to boil the ocean, because, there's this long tail of x86 applications that have, to your point earlier, have existed since the 80s and 90s. And there's 5 people using them, right, still. And so we're not going to address those now. What we're trying to address is what do people use? So those top 100, then top 200, then top 300 apps. And I think we're making great progress there. One of the things I wanted to mention is, look, app developers historically, when you ask them to do anything, their first question is scale. Like, how many users can I get, right? Because to the app development community, it's all about as many users as possible. It's all about scale.
Everybody has users.
Even ask the app teams at Google. Like, it's all about scale. Give me 1 billion users and I'll talk to you or whatever. So it's about scale. So we do need to scale. But I think what you're going to see over the next couple months is, now that we've got the Electrons and the Chromiums and the Unity's all announced and out there, I think you're going to see some very interesting applications. So do we also come out and announce that they're recompiling for ARM?
We need Microsoft
in a big way.
Yeah, we need Microsoft Office, and we need the CC suite, right? From Adobe, right?
Well, Teams and Office, I think, are taken care of.
So that's good.
But I think that you're going to see some announcements by some you might have mentioned them a couple times already today, app developers that are
Don's excited, guys.
Are going to be announcing.
You can't see it right now because it's an audio show, but I'm telling you, Don's excited.
And in cooperation with some really cool devices that are going to be announced as well.
So let's talk about that. I have 2 things before we wap up your segment.
Sure.
The one thing I want to talk about is 5G and that how that's also another thing that you bring to the table. That even if you're not looking at if you're just looking at 4G, of course you're there. But 5G, you get the whole 5G side of things as well. But I also want to talk to you about something that Mishaal brought up, which is the the Chrome OS side. I love Chromebooks and I use them a lot, primarily because if I just need to be in a web browser, it's just great. It's just a great experience, right? Especially since my universe is heavily in Google services.
Right.
Are we going to potentially see HCX Chromebooks with connectivity?
There's no reason why we can't.
Right. That technically there isn't, but
yeah.
we haven't heard much talk about this because obviously the focus has been on Microsoft, which is great because that's where the bread and butter is for everyone, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think you will. The Chrome situation inside of Google has been a little mysterious.
Okay. Interesting.
You know, they've gotten rid of people and they've sort of, I think that they're still struggling. You know, to do this, what we did with Windows took a lot of leaning in by Microsoft.
Right.
They had to lean in, and they had to assign resources. They had to collaborate with us. This has been a partnership. It's been a really, really good partnership with Microsoft. We need the same thing with Chrome. There are different issues,
right? Of course,
some lesser, and some not so, but we need them to lean in. And I think Google's a little, I don't know if they're preoccupied or whatever the word you're looking for, but they're doing a bunch of stuff, right? And so they're leaning in with us on 5G in a really big way. But we haven't sort of, I think, really struck that balance with the Chrome team to really enable the ecosystem of Chromebooks to just easily deploy. Now, another thing that's going to help is, and again, you'll hear this in the next several months from us, is as we fill in our roadmap.
Yeah.
So HCX is going to be that North Star, that guiding light, right? But then in order for us to really scale from a volume perspective in this category over time, we have to fill in our roadmap. So we have to go from, $800 plus devices all the way down to $300 devices, where a lot of Chromebooks live, by the way. And so you'll see some new platforms announcements coming from us soon, which will then, I think, unlock a lot of the Chrome ecosystem.
6CX.
Oh, yeah.
Or 7CX.
7CX. So I think you'll see that.
Okay.
And that's another thing I think that will help. OEMs say, I might do a design on this platform, and I might do a Windows design and a Chrome design. And so I think we'll see that as we start to go wider and broader. As now that HCX has been sort of solidified. So I think there's a lot of great stuff coming down the pipe, and I'm sure we'll see you in Hawaii, and I'm sure we'll have lots of good stuff to talk about there, awesome. And even before that.
Yeah.
And we look what I look forward to is I've seen the first set of HCX designs, and they're amazing.
Right. That's what
from awesome OEMs.
They're basically what we were imagining when you announced 835 for laptops back then. We
have some great partners that are going to be launching HCX designs into the market that are from great brands. So we're really looking forward to that.
That's awesome.
And then you said something about 5G.
I wanted to touch on how the HCX platform is really optimized for use with 5G, right? I mean, just like the 855 mobile platform is, you guys have really worked hard to do that and to make it possible. So I think that's kind of what I'm excited about as well, is that you've announced this news with Lenovo of launching a 5G capable PC. So you want to talk about that briefly?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, Lenovo's been a great partner since the very beginning. They were with us with Wave 1, with the 835 devices, realizing, again, that it's a place to start. You got to start somewhere and then you improve over time. So they've been a great partner. They were super excited about doing this Project Limitless with us, about bringing the first 5G capable PC to market, announcing it. By the way, it's not only the first 5G PC, it's the first device on the planet with our X55 modem in it.
Right. And
we announced X55 at MWC.
Correct.
It's the first device that actually has a working X55 in it before phone.
Right.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And so again, super excited about that. The fact that it's working, the fact that it's on Changhua, a great partner here in Taiwan of ours too. Happily built us a sub-6 5G network here at the W, which is fantastic. And because they haven't launched commercially, Taiwan hasn't launched 5G yet. So
like 2020.
So it's 2020. So it's pre-commercial, but they were great about doing that. So being able to show that off has been great, and that's just going to unlock a whole new world of experiences. Right. The low latency, the super fast speed, and the ultra reliability and the security that 5G is going to bring to the PC ecosystem and the compute ecosystem is just going to unlock a whole myriad of experiences from cloud gaming, right, to a lot of enterprise stuff, private networks.
I think there's a little bit more to the story. I feel like people are missing out on this. A lot of people are looking at this device, the Project Limitless, as it's called, and they say, "Oh, it looks like a Yoga C60 rebadge." And it first of all, it's not the final product.
It's not the final product.
Secondly, yes, it does look like it, but I've actually looked at some photos now, and it's thicker and by a little bit because it's a prototype, and it's generally the design language of the C60 630, but it's very different. It's very slightly wider. There's a few things anyway. So don't lock your brain onto that design. It's the idea and the product.
It's a representation.
We're going to get a very polished device out of it.
It's a representation. In fact, what you should really look at is the reference design that Compal built.
Oh,
which was right next to it.
Can they make it? Can Lenovo make a white version like that?
I don't know. They could.
I mean, it looks so white with gray keys or silver keys was really dope.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, and I mean that was a super small, super thin.
Yeah, that's really
PC,
nice.
and that it supports both millimeter wave and sub-6.
Yeah, so that's the other thing a lot of people didn't touch on because your partner here at the W for this demo was Changhua, which is sub-6.
Right.
This is both millimeter and sub-6, which is and you have a lot of real estate in that chassis, so the performance should be really outstanding.
Yeah, we're excited about it.
Well, that's cool. Well, listen, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Anytime.
And thanks for having us here as well. And I feel like, I've been waiting so long and hard for this. I'm super stoked. And I'm really also hoping Apple brings an ARM device to the table that's not an iOS device, because some of us just really need that heavy lifting of using, a full compute experience. And it's nice to have choices: Chrome, Windows, and maybe macOS. So, now you guys are in good terms with Apple again.
Yes,
so
you're friends again.
X55 on the next MacBook is what I want to see.
That'd be killer.
And that'd be amazing. All right, well, thanks so much, Don. And we'll be right back with Mishaal for the news.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mishaal, what are your thoughts? I mean, having Don, it's hard when I have execs on a show. People are going to listen to the podcast like, "Oh, Miriam is so enthusiastic. You're so friendly and likely and liking it." I'm like, look, I have been looking forward to ARM Windows, full Windows on ARM that actually works properly and reliably for so long. I cannot not get excited about this. Like, yes, it's Qualcomm, it's marketing. We're like rah-rah-rahing here. But it's not rah-rah-rahing. There's so many implications involved here. That's what I think is really critical.
Seriously, I mean, I would just want to reiterate what I said before. The experience of Windows on lower-end, mid-range hardware was awful back then. I mean, just to improve performance, I would install Neverware's Cloud Ready, which is like their Chromium OS fork, just to make the performance not terrible on older hardware. And like now, finally, with HCX in Windows and ARM, things seem like it's tolerable now.
I'm impressed with the fact that we're seeing slightly better performance than an i5 that is on a fanless design.
Exactly, right?
That's what a lot of people are not looking at that part. Like, forget the 4G and the 5G. Not everybody needs that connectivity.
Right.
It's nice to have, forget the instant on. My Macs and most Windows laptops at XDX are pretty much, for all practical purposes, instant on. But it's more like the stuff about, being able to run cool on a thin and light where you don't have to design a chassis that is thermally throttling your device. Like Apple has this problem with x86 right now, where when they built the MacBook Pro, Dave 2D talked about it in the last video where he reviewed the Core i9 MacBook Pro, the new one. And he's like, it's actually a great video, I don't know if you watch it, because it starts with him pretending to have been abducted by Apple and forced to make a statement in front of the camera. It's
definitely
really
gotta check that out.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll link the video in the show notes. But so like basically, he's one of his points that he makes that I think is really interesting is that he says it looks like the design from 2016 now, or whenever it was, the MacBook Pro design, like the physical enclosure design, is no longer capable of handling the chips that Intel is making, basically. Like it's that new MacBook Pro is doing much better with thermal management than any previous MacBook Pro, but he's saying they're stuck in that super thin, super light chassis that they developed back in the day when they didn't really know where the Intel roadmap was exactly going, and you can feel that. And you're not going to avoid this completely. You still have to design for thermals with the HCX, right? And you're not talking about the same class of chips anyway here. But my point is that if you have no need for a fan, instantly your design choices broaden significantly.
Right, and as we saw with the initial performance benchmarks, they mentioned that they could have the sustained performance without throttling, which is pretty incredible. As you mentioned, like all these design considerations have to be taken into account. We're getting all these super thin laptops, but it comes at a compromise of sustained performance. They have to throttle eventually. You'll hear the fans kick in. You might feel the device getting warm. And I don't feel like with Qualcomm approaching things from the bottom up, from smartphones, from much smaller devices, and they're coming into the realm of laptops.
They can only
They
go
figured
up,
this out.
right? They have so much headroom before they hit the ceiling compared to Intel, who's already kind of touching the ceiling in headroom.
Right.
And you know, and like that's why I get so excited and I sound like I'm a peon for Qualcomm in my show at the first evening. I don't want to sound like it, but I do believe it's not just Qualcomm. This could be any other company making ARM chips right now. I'd be excited. But you don't see MediaTek going out there and working on Windows laptops, right? Maybe they are. Maybe I don't know about it. But like my point is like we need that to happen. Like Intel can no longer have the monopoly on Windows PCs because it's not until they can come up with an architecture that is as competitive. It's just not going to happen. We're in a world where ultra efficiency in terms of power, thermals, connectivity, battery life, and thinness and lightness are going to become absolutely the standards for all mobile computers. In fact, we're even seeing gaming laptops shrinking down in size and weight and thickness because that's the way it's going. So, you know, it's not like, yeah, you can make a chunky laptop that has the best performance in the world, but who's going to buy and lug that around, you know?
Especially when it has only like 2 hours of battery life.
Exactly. So anyway, there's a bunch of topics. Let's talk about the first thing this freshest thing that you brought up before the show just started, which is the Moto Z4 suddenly went on sale on Amazon.
Boy. Yeah,
was it? Best Buy?
It's suddenly appeared out of nowhere on Amazon. You can actually buy it right now. So it showed up like hours and hours ago, and it still hasn't been taken down. And
so
it's already shipping.
Do you think it's a mistake?
No, it's not. I don't think it's a mistake. I mean, it's if you click on the link, it's probably still up there. You click on the purchase from Amazon link, it's probably still up there right now.
Look, let's see. No.
Oh no, it's gone. It's gone.
It's gone. Anyway.
Well, anyway, it was up for a while, and some guy on Reddit posted it hands-on. He apparently already bought it somehow. Maybe he noticed it before anyone else.
It's amazing.
And he already has a hands-on, he has sample photos and everything. All the specs are posted.
So let's talk about the specs. So this looks to me, so first of all, what's the price?
$499.
So $499, $100 more than a Pixel 3a. And so very close to the Pixel 3a XL, and in size, very close to the Pixel 3a XL. So what's interesting here, I'm going to read you the specs real quick. You, the audience. Snapdragon 675, because I know you already saw it. So 675 is just a little slightly better version than the 670 we have in the Pixel 3As.
Correct.
4 gigs of RAM and 120 gigs of storage. That sounds very similar to the Pixel as well, except it's got 64 gigs. Mm-hmm. Pixel 3a, again, we're comparing because the prices are very similar. 6.4-inch OLED with 1080p. Ding, ding, ding. But this is pretty much a Pixel 3a XL competitor in terms of almost everything here. And has a 48 megapixel sensor. We don't know, is it the Sony IMX586? Maybe not.
I believe it's an OmniVision sensor.
Oh God.
Q technology, I think.
Because OmniVision was in bed with Motorola for a long time, and we got some terrible cameras out of that partnership. No offense to any OmniVision employees listening. But it just never... Well, I'm hoping it's actually the Samsung or the Sony, because honestly, those are great sensors.
Right.
So quad pixel thing, maybe that's what maybe it is. I mean, you know, quad pixel could be Motorola's branding. And that's that. And of course, it's a Moto mod compatible.
Actually,
jack? Does it have a headphone jack like the leaks?
I don't think... I'm not sure if it does.
The leaks had a headphone jack.
I think so.
So, I mean, I'll put the link in the show notes. There is a video there as well.
There's one interesting thing about the video. You'll notice on the Moto mod compatibility, the person who purchased it early noticed that there's like a little gap between where the mod sits and the device itself. So even though it's compatible and it fits, it's not really like a tight fit. It's kind of like sticking out of it a little bit. It's really weird.
What, the mods are sticking out?
Mod. Yeah, it feels like it's not fully, doesn't feel fully fit together.
That's weird.
You definitely got to check it out on the video. Like,
so that can't. Maybe it's a defective one you got.
I'm really not sure because it doesn't seem like this is supposed to
Does
go up.
do the mods work?
It looks like it because the guy put it on. You could hear the connection sound. He mentioned he tested his battery mod first.
Interesting.
But yeah, it just went up out of nowhere this morning, and no announcement, no tweets, no social media, no YouTube posts, no nothing.
All right. Well, we got a lot more to cover, so I'm going to kind of rapid fire it. Let's talk about Computex. We should at least spend 10, 15 minutes on that. We're at Computex 2019, and it is the same old. It's the PC show mostly. So we're both mobile first kind of people, more phone centric. Unlike last year where we got the ROG phone announced, this year there really hasn't been any phone announcements, and that's not unusual for Computex. I mean, we're here more for I'm here because my interest in mobile tech podcast is about all things mobile. So phones primarily, but wearables, headphones, laptops, 2-in-1s, tablets. I include cars because I think, especially electric cars, there are mobile devices you get into that ferry you around rather than put in your pocket, but they're mobile device, they're mobility device. So let's talk about basically beyond all the Qualcomm news, which you've heard at length. There's been obviously ASUS. This is a turf of ASUS. This is their hometown. So ASUS kind of always drives the show pretty strongly here, and it's been pretty mellow for them this year. I feel like normally you kind of come to Computex for the spectacle that's going to be the ASUS press conference. They know how to put a show. They're like kind of like Apple is. They know how to do a good presentation. And Johnny Shee, who's usually the guy on stage, is a super charismatic dude, right? So, of course, I went to the press conference last night, and it was just the same awesome show. I was there with David and Mel, our good friend, who's been on the podcast many times, and we just had a blast. So in terms of news, what they announced was, let's talk about the phone stuff first quickly. So recently, the ZenFone 6 was launched. Oh, yeah. And I talked about that on a podcast last week with Joshua Vergara. And they announced the 30th anniversary edition called the Edition 30 of the ZenFone 6, which instead of having that kind of bland looking back with the weird blue font ASUS logo, has the spun metal finish on the back. I don't know if it's metal or plastic. Is it glass, the ZenFone 6? Have you played with one?
I haven't played with one. I think it's still glass. I played with one, but it was in a case, so I don't know if it was glass or plastic in the back. I would assume that it's glass because that's the standard these days. But this might not. When I say it's spun metal, it looks like spun metal. It's probably glass. I don't expect it to be metal on the back. That would be a kind of weird to go back to a metal phone these days. But anyway, it's got 12 gigs of RAM. What is it, 250? 512. 512? Is it 512? I think it's 512. I mean, it's insane. So that's one thing they announced, along with two other 30th editions, the Edition 30 products, a laptop, which is basically a ZenBook 13, but it's a bespoke one and it's covered in white leather, and they claim it's the smallest 13-inch laptop in the world. I don't know what smallest means. Is it thin? Is it light? Is it narrow width? What is? I haven't seen it, so I don't know. And then there is a motherboard. They announced the freaking motherboard, a 30th anniversary motherboard. That was basically the things we didn't know were coming. The things we knew were coming because we got briefed the day prior was that crazy ZenBook Pro Duo. Oh,
and
boy.
I know you're not a laptop guy, but I want to kind of know, just throw it out there. What do you think of that thing? I have a video. I'll link it in the show notes. Check it out. But I want to hear what you think.
So I saw your hands-on video, and I just want to say I have no idea what they're doing. The trackpad is on the right side, and as you mentioned, that's not very ergonomically friendly for lefties.
But they've done that with their Zephyrus ROG laptops.
Yeah, but why?
Laptop. I don't know. That's exactly
and the keyboard is so stretched. It's so small.
So there's actually a wrist pad accessory you can buy.
Why would you buy a wrist pad for a laptop?
I know. A ZenBook, especially, which is supposed to be an ultra portable. But did you see how thick that is? That is not an ultra portable.
And the little the screen, it's a 4K in horizontal dimensions. Yeah. Why? We saw people barely use the MacBooks, the MacBook's touchpad thing. Touch bar, whatever it's called. And I don't see this being very useful. There's just not a lot you can do with it. I saw you put a Windows Explorer
So let me actually walk you through some of the use cases because I wasn't able to capture this in my video. So, okay, for those of you who don't want to watch the video or just want the quick gist of it, imagine a laptop, take a MacBook with a touch bar. Imagine you grow the touch bar in height so that it's about 10 times taller than it is, right? and you shift the keyboard to the front edge of the computer. You move the trackpad to the right. So now you have the keyboard and to the front with the trackpad to the right front, and then the half of the top of the, the bottom half of the laptop, half of that is a display that's a 4K width, but half the height of the display that's on the lid. So the display on the lid is actually really nice. It's a 4K OLED panel, and it's glorious, like all OLEDs.
4K OLED.
But the bottom display is the same width, and it lines up perfectly with it so that you can make an app, basically cover both. Like you can spread an app over two. So now you have more vertical, so it's more than 4:3 aspect ratio. So if you're a coder, for example, that's one of the use cases that like you can code and have two windows open, vertical windows that kind of span into the base of the laptop on that half display. Now both displays have touch. The half display at the bottom, like the touch bar, has like a matte finish, like it's etched so that there's no reflections. It's really weird. So it actually doesn't look very good, honestly, because it's also an IPS, it's not OLED. So it's a good, don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's a good IPS panel, but putting an IPS panel like right next to an OLED panel is tough, right? You're not going to, calibration issues, brightness issues, and then this etching that makes it look matte, to present reflections is a real issue as well. So that's what they did. And then you're going to say, okay, I'd be totally on board with all that, even though the layout's a bit weird, if this had been like the Huawei MateBook X Pro, like a thin and light 15-inch laptop, like something that, is powered by USB-C, has some kind of MX-based NVIDIA graphics, and it's just a high-end Core i7 or something. Like what most creators use, like David Kogan uses like a Razer gaming laptop, but this thing is bulkier than a Razer laptop. And I'm talking about the slimmest Razer you can buy. So I was expecting it to be that form factor, like a slim Razer, like a Dell XPS 15, something that size. The thing is literally an inch thick. Jesus. Has an NVIDIA RTX some whatever it is gaming thing in there, and a Core i9. And I'm like, wait. And they're totally targeting creators. I'm like, this is a gaming laptop that should be an ROG product that you relabeled into a ZenBook. ZenBook is your ultra portable Ultrabook that you created the Ultrabook with Intel back with the ASUS ZenBook, the original. Like you were the first to copy the MacBook Air and make a Windows laptop feel light and thin. And now you're shipping a ZenBook, branded ZenBook with an inch thick chassis. I am not on board. I understand where you're going with this, but creators don't need that kind of power. They do not need that kind of power. So here are the use cases. 4 windows, so you can have the calibrated high quality graphics editing, video editing, whatever happening in the main window, on the lid part. And then the bottom display could have either one panel, 2 panel, 3 panels. So they have this window manager that's optimized for placing these and memorizing the layout, so you can switch between layouts. That's really cool. But then they have these apps you can install that are, I guess, as x86 helper apps for Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and some of the Adobe apps. And basically they add controls.
Interesting. Like
the touch bar does, that talk by macros or some sort of inter-Windows messaging or something to control, so you can do font size changes and, all the shortcuts you see in your toolbars. Basically, it's a toolbars that can be laid out in that, like a touch bar, basically from Apple, but 10 times taller. And then there is other use cases where they're say you're editing a photo, you can have the source photo you're editing, like the original that you're trying to modify, and sitting in one of those windows down there. So you can have a reference all the time. You can, for example, if you're like a, powered marketer, you need to have a messaging app. You can have a little chat app running in one of these. And so they have all these use, and some of these use cases are perfectly valid. If you're a gamer, they have the game running on the main screen, and then they have a Twitch stream of your front-facing camera showing you there, and next to it, the chat window for Twitch.
Oh, wow.
So stuff like that. So there are use cases. I'm not saying the idea is bad. It's the implementation. The 1 inch thick, the specs they use, Core i9, RTX, yes, you can't do a gaming laptop without those, but this is not a gaming laptop. They should have sold this as a Zephyrus or ROG, and then people would understand what it is. And if creators wants to buy it, they can. You know, the thing has a power brick that's like both of my wrists together. Like it's, you put two, like put like, if you're listening right now, put your wrists in a ball and put them next to each other. That's how big the freaking power brick is. So not USB-C. I just don't understand it.
So in summary, the use cases for this secondary screen are definitely more robust than what you might get on the MacBook's touch bar. But the device is suffering from poor ergonomics. It's a lot thicker than it should be. It's,
the layout with
the layout with the trackpad on the right is kind of awkward for lefties, especially.
Yeah, exactly.
The keyboard is kind of shrunk down. You have to buy like an extra wrist pad accessory that no one's going to buy.
You don't have to buy it, but you know it's available.
It's available, okay. And
it might be in the box. Who knows?
Yeah, and the branding is kind of weird.
The branding is
it
weird
shouldn't be a
because
ZenBook. It should
be
be
an
ROG.
Zephyrus. And the other thing is, we don't know price or availability.
Okay.
Or anything. And it could be very expensive because those specs are I mean, don't get me wrong, it's got Optane memory. This is a gaming laptop. Like, oh, I'm so pissed off by this because I like my ultralights, ultra thins. And last year they gave us the ZenBook Pro with the screen pad where the touchpad was replaced by a screen. And they kept it to be an ultralight. It was Core i9, but it was it was like basically a highly spec MacBook Pro and in the same kind of super light and thin and portable chassis. I'm not sure if it had USB-C power, but it definitely had a smaller brick. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, I don't understand it. And I'm sure there's going to be some people listening to the show, some creators saying, but Miriam, don't you understand the reason Kogan uses a Razer is because, you know, yeah, he wants that video card. He wants that performance. And I'm like, I get it. But most creators that I know will, especially those who travel a lot, will actually prioritize. They'll compromise for some portability. Like they won't, I know very few that carry a gaming laptop when they go to all the trade shows when they're traveling every week, okay? Like that's not the reality. I'm an extremist because I have a MacBook 12-inch. I'm like compromising way more than I should for the size and form factor. But there are some extremists that are going to go the other way. But I think for the creators are generally somewhere in the middle. And this device is not in the middle. It really feels like a weird branding exercise. They even made it look like a ZenBook. So, you know, spun metal finish, the polished machine bevels, edges. And if you look at it on a table, that the thickness is hidden by the way the edges are like tapered. And so you have to it's only when you lift it up that you go like, holy crap, this is a monster. But when you see it sitting somewhere, it actually looks like a ZenBook.
Yeah, I
like
definitely didn't get that impression from your video
light.
that it was super thick. I'll definitely have to look at it.
You know
myself.
what I'm saying? It's really weird. Like I just don't understand it at all. So normally we get excited about ASUS because, you know, they launch something that feels like it's pushing the envelope in every dimension.
To their credit, the Zenfone 6 looks incredible.
I mean, it's cool.
From an enthusiast standpoint. Headphone jack, expandable storage.
So I was, you know, David is reviewing it. David ML is reviewing it for Android Authority right now. And so I got to play with it a little bit. And the battery life is not there. It's
really,
yeah. I mean, we were side by siding usage. I was using the Honor 20 Pro with a Kirin 980 and a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, and literally I used 20% battery life, constantly tweeting and Instagramming and posting live from 2 press conferences, and I used 20% of my battery life with hotspot turned on the whole time for my other phones, and he went through 50% on a 5,000 milliamp hour battery.
Wow.
So maybe it's because it's an early build and software is not optimized yet, but I'm not. Look, I want to say I'm excited about the Zenfone 6. I like ASUS phones. They're traditionally not the most exciting, but I do like them. And this one I'm more excited about because of the way the camera works and, you know, great selfies, big battery, headphone jack, good specs, good price. IPS is a bit weak though. The brightness is, you cannot read this thing in direct sunlight. There's absolutely no way. Max brightness is barely readable in ambient light. Like it's got some issues. And like I'm okay with all that at $500. You make sacrifices. You made a sacrifice on the display. That's fine. But I feel like, you know, I'm a little less. My excitement is a little dampened now after having talked to somebody who I know I can trust on, you know, is this really delivering what we expect? And so, you know, let's see how it goes. I don't think it's anything that can't be fixed in software, and maybe a bit of more brightness can be eked out of that display. But I have a feeling that the reason it's not maxing out on brightness is probably because they're having battery life issues for whatever reason. I don't know why they would have battery life issues. It's Qualcomm Snapdragon 855. It's very efficient. Who knows? It's stock Android though, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Right? All right. So anyway, so the ZenBook Pro Duo is an odd device. And yes, it's definitely different. And yes, it's definitely, again, it's innovative. I agree, but the implementation seems very poor to me, more so than many ASUS implementations that have been poor in the past, because they've done some crazy stuff that hasn't really been useful. Now, the interesting thing is that ScreenPad that was only on the ASUS ZenBook Pro last year, the 15 only, is now available across the board on all ZenBooks. So if you buy ZenBook 13 for 2019, the new version that came out of Computex, it has so you can turn it off if you want. It looks like a normal trackpad, or you can have a display on there, and it's like basically the Apple Touch bar. And that actually you can mirror an actual window from Windows on there, but mostly it's designed like they've created a little mini OS that runs on there that has like all these helper apps, and it's all touch friendly, and in fact that stuff is also available on the Duo, right? Mm-hmm. So you just have a bigger surface to play with. So it's interesting that they're kind of pushing that. Also, the VivoBook S series, which is their mid-range, also all have it now. So they're going all out. They're like sold on all their devices having that trackpad with a display in it.
Oh,
but at least it's in the middle and below the keyboard like it should be. So, and you can turn it off if you don't like it, but it's there. So that's what we got from ASUS. We got the 30th anniversary triad of motherboard, phone, and laptop. We got this ZenBook Pro Duo, and then there's a few little things that I mentioned in my video. New Wi-Fi 6 routers that have really cool mesh networking features. Give you much more control than the other mesh networked. Basically right now, mesh network routers like Eero or Google Wi-Fi or whatever are pretty much appliances, right? You plug them in, you get a mobile app, you can do configuration of basic things, and you forget about it. And
not power users.
90% of people love that, and I think it's great. But ASUS lets you do that if you want. But you can also dig in and do some special configuration, saying like, I want the backhaul to be over Ethernet instead of over 5G. They have a dedicated dual 5G. No, 5G. What am I saying? 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi 6 backhaul. They have a dual 5 gigahertz backhaul radio setup. In addition to the 2.45 gigahertz actual connection the devices to the network on these new routers. Pretty amazing. And so if you have they have this feature called AI Mesh, which is a kind of own implementation of kind of self-configuring mesh. If you have an AI Mesh router from last year, for example, which I think is when they introduced it, it will work with the new AI Mesh routers. So all AI Mesh routers will work together. So for example, if you bought a pair of AI Mesh routers from ASUS last year, and you're a baller and you just moved to a bigger house, you can buy the new generation Wi-Fi 6 AI Mesh routers they just announced today, and you can use your old one as nodes somewhere else in the house. And it will seamlessly make it all work so that even there's a drop in performance on those nodes, it will just like make it work properly. Pretty cool. And then there's a couple of displays, standalone standalone battery powered portable displays, Zen screens they call them, which are, there's a 16.5 inch, I think, or 15.6 inch touch screen, 4-hour battery life, 1080p USB Type-C, and basically it's super thin, super light. Looks like basically somebody ripped the lid off of a laptop, and you can plug that into a phone and whatever. And then they have a 17-inch one, which is an ROG branded one, which has a 240 hertz refresh.
Wow.
It's not 4K or anything, but 240 hertz refresh on a thin, light chassis with battery, 4-hour battery life on 240 hertz. Pretty cool. I kind of almost want to get one of those to carry around to keep in my hotel room to plug my MacBook into, or some other laptops so I have more real estate, or double the real estate. And then that's ASUS. That's basically what happens. As I said, not nearly as exciting as in the past when they've launched like ultra thin, ultra light, weird. Like last year they did a dual screen laptop. Basically, what this ZenBook Pro Duo is 3/4 of that laptop, because it still has the keyboard. See, what I think they should have done is sold a laptop that has a screen on the lid and a screen on the bottom, like full screen, like completely. And then imagine you have a very thin scissor mechanism overlay with little metal like conductive pads that touch the screen. And when you mount that on, you can mount it anywhere towards the lid or towards you. And then you have the other half of the display usable for, like basically a touch bar. But then you have the keyboard, you can position it anywhere you want. And it knows, like it knows, it creates touch points underneath it. So the scissors key touch the screen and enable. And so you get, the touch responsiveness, the type responsiveness of a real keyboard. And if you want to travel light, you remove that accessory, it's super thin. You can put it it comes with only a little felt bag. You leave it in your bag or something. And you can use a laptop with a touchscreen typing on glass, or you put that thing on and you type on scissor keys. That's innovative. That would have been super cool. And an ultralight or ultra thin form factor. Or they could have had, instead of the trackpad on the right, a trackpad you pull out from underneath the keyboard in the middle. Because the thing is, I think what they're headed to with this is you don't need a trackpad once you have touch screens everywhere. And, it's like using an iPad. You don't need a trackpad for an iPad. And that's kind of where they're trying to go with this, I think. That's why the trackpad is relegated to the right side, and it can be turned into a numpad if you want. Like it has a little button that turns into a numpad. Anyway, don't get it.
That's actually a lot more news from ASUS than I thought.
Yeah, well, so a couple of fallouts from last week we should really cover quickly are the ARM. So last week when we recorded, Joshua and I, this happened pretty much while we were recording. It's typical. So of course my recording then gets published 2 days later, and then the news is not up to date. So as you know, the Huawei apocalypse, as I like to call it, is happening right now. It's a very, very sad state of affairs. Huawei being cut off by a lot of American companies. But so in a big surprise move, ARM, which is a UK-based company, also cut off Huawei, saying that there's a lot of American technology or US patents or something.
So we don't know exactly what was cut off
here.
We do know that so under the export regulations, that if anything is more than 25% US produced, then that technology is subject to the new regulations. So the idea is that since ARM has multiple offices in the United States, I think 6 or more, it's possible that some of the technologies that they license to Huawei have parts of it originating from these offices, maybe over 25%. And so their thought is that if we were to continue licensing to Huawei, that the Trump administration would slap us down.
Weird. I mean, that one came out of nowhere for me. Like, I understand Google, I understand Microsoft, I understand Qualcomm. But ARM, I was like, what? And then, now we also have the SDA Association who certify SD cards and SD card readers. Although I don't think that's a huge deal in the sense that they could create their own. They already have their nano memory anyway.
Right.
But I mean, look, the madness continues. I've covered this thing. I don't want to go in detail on this show because you listened to last week's with Joshua Vergara, because we talked about this at length. This is bad news. Bad news for innovation, bad news for customers, bad news for the future of mobile, because it affects not only does it affect Huawei and it affects consumers and innovation, but it affects potentially, it can have a snowball effect with all this trade war stuff that it's really being a peon of. Because if China decides to retaliate and, for example, say to Apple, you can't manufacture in China anymore, they're not going to be able to, in a day's turnaround, move to Vietnam or India where they could manufacture at pretty similar costs. We're going to see iPhone prices rise incredibly. We're going to see a lack of, availability of phones for a while. It would be a catastrophe. It would affect a lot of people.
And that's not even the worst thing they could do. They could also hike, taxes on rare earth.
Oh yeah, I drive a Tesla and it's full of lithium batteries. Where does this lithium come from? Well, a lot of it comes from China, and so like that. I mean, there's so much. So Trump is playing with fire. He is really messing things up for everyone here, and hopefully, it gets resolved somehow. Somebody finds some reason, and it's not going to be him, but somebody somewhere along the way finds, because the damage is already done. That's the thing. Here we are a week later. European, like sales of Huawei and Honor devices in countries where they were doing really well and were well received, like part of Europe, India, others, is already tanking. And so the damage is already done, in the sense that even if everything gets reset to normal in the next week or 2 weeks or month or year even, you know, it's going to be, you're going to say, well, who cares? It's damage to Huawei. Why would you be so loyal? I'm not loyal to Huawei. I know that they are driving innovation. The reason Samsung has the Galaxy S10 being as good as it is out there this year is because Huawei lit a fire under their ass. The reason Apple is making that rumored Apple iPhone 11 with 3 cameras is because Huawei did 3 cameras, okay? These companies are not, Apple is no longer innovating as much as they did. And Samsung has sat on their laurels. We've seen it. Like the S8 and the S9 was just an evolution of the S8. I'm not saying those phones are bad. I like their phones. They're good devices. But the innovation has been driven by Huawei because they've been pushing hard on hardware, not software services, none of that. They don't know how to do that well. But, you know, imaging, cameras, just generally, like you look at the battery life and the performance of a Kirin 980 device, it is unbelievable. We're talking head-to-head with OnePlus, which is, in my opinion, the best implementation of any Android we have on Qualcomm chips. Wouldn't you agree?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are some like software tricks that they employ to give their Kirin 980 smartphones some really good battery life. You know all that, but yeah, you have to admit the efficiency of the Kirin 980 chips is incredible.
Every time I pick up, it's like if you were to put a Huawei Honor device in a case that I couldn't recognize and put a skin on it I couldn't recognize, and you told me to use it, I would be able to tell you this is a Huawei device, just because like there's a springiness to the app's loading speeds, to the scrolling speeds, to everything that is just really there. And then you look at the battery life, and it's really incredible. So as I mentioned earlier about the ZenFone 6 yesterday, comparing with David Immel with my Honor 20 Pro side by side, like I was just like, I was blown away. I'm like, I cannot believe that I have hotspot turned on and I keep posting on Twitter. My screen on is on. I'm shooting photos, uploading anything the photos, uploading as I'm going here. And my battery life is just like flatlining. It's not even moving, you know? It's crazy. A couple of more things. We don't have a lot of time, but I want to maybe pick your brain on the ARM chip designs. So there's new ARM designs chips. They don't manufacture them. They license their designs to other companies, including Huawei. Yeah. So who's using them? Huawei with the Kirins. Qualcomm uses them on some of the lower end chips, and did in the past, right? At least
most of their CPUs are still customized now.
Yeah,
even like their mid-range.
But they did for a while go back. They went from Creo back to ARM designs for the 808 and the 810, right?
Yeah, that was a few years ago.
Yeah, a few years ago. But don't they have some 200s and 400s that are still running on basic ARM designs? I think so.
Possibly.
Anyway, Qualcomm a little bit.
Samsung too.
Samsung Exynos. MediaTek runs their ARM designs. Yeah, they don't customize. They don't have their own, do they? Okay.
No.
So basically, most of the ARM stuff out there, you know, ARM designs the architecture and manufacturers kind of do their spin on it, right? Exynos, Kirin, whatever. And so there's a bunch of new designs, and maybe you can jump in because you know more than I didn't actually read this, but apparently that's the A77 and Mali G77.
So yeah, the Cortex A77 is their new CPU design. CPU side, there haven't been that many improvements in comparison to the previous generation from the A75 to the A76. That was a huge jump, and that's why we saw like such incredible numbers from Qualcomm and Huawei with the Snapdragon 855 and the Kirin 980. That's why they were able to make such huge generational leaps.
Qualcomm doesn't use their designs.
Well, I mean, they're still based on
that,
right?
Okay.
But the A77 just increases the I think overall 20% on the same maximum CPU frequency of 3 gigahertz. Just better IPC. It's not significantly better overall on the CPU side. It's not really much to talk about.
What do you think the results are going to be for the average user once we see chips that implement that architecture? Better battery life?
So just more more efficiency, better battery life, just better web browsing.
I think they're talking about neural networks and machine learning optimized compute stuff, right? Too. Better use of compute resources for those kind of problems.
Right. The biggest jump though is on the GPU side.
So that's
entirely new
with the G77
architecture, right? With their they're calling the new architecture line the Valhalla, just like the anglicized, more commonly known as Valhalla. Yeah, you've probably heard of that. But that's their biggest jump because for years they've been behind Qualcomm and more recently Apple with their GPU designs. but this is going to give a huge jump. I think overall 30% more power efficient, 30% better power performance density, just way better than their previous generation. So on the upcoming Kirin 985, which likely uses the G77,
if it ever makes it a device that we can get.
Yeah, we've known Huawei to be one of the first customers of ARM licensed designs to implement their designs into like their newest chips. So if we do see the Kirin 985 and possibly the Huawei Mate 30, if that ever comes about, we'll see some huge performance bumps in terms of gaming performance.
That's good to know. So yeah, look, it's ARM rules, as I always say, ARM rules the world. If you're not on board, if you think that all this Intel bashing, it's not Intel bashing. Intel had Xscale. They had their ARM division. They got rid of it. That was even back then when iPhone wasn't this, even back then when I think Symbian phones were barely at the beginning of their days, smartphones were barely existent. I back then shook my head and said, "This is the stupidest mistake you've ever done, Intel." And I still stand by that belief. I think that Intel should have continued licensing ARM and creating their own designs, and even if it's to use on hard drive controllers or whatever, like it is critical to have an ARM, ecosystem if you're a chip manufacturer today, and they are.
Right.
I think they're
hurting on both ends, from smartphone, from Qualcomm moving up, and from AMD coming down on them. They're hurting from both ends.
So basically, I'm like, I like Intel. I like they're good people, but they're based in Oregon, where I have a residence. I want to support them, but get your S together, okay? Intel, buy an ARM license and start making ARM chips. I know you can. You don't have to give up x86. I mean, lots of good use for x86 on servers and other mission critical. I mean, my Tesla is an x86 based, compute for the main screen, and it's really responsive and nice. I don't know. I mean, you can make it's fine. Just we need some ARM chips, okay? Last thing is some rumors of TikTok. So
oh boy.
I mean, we're just going to glance all this because we gotta wrap up. But TikTok, the company who makes, company is not called TikTok. TikTok is in video. Yeah, thank you. Video app, right? Very popular in Asia, particularly. And there's rumors that they're going to make a phone.
So the rumors are that the founder is it's like his pet project.
Okay.
He just wants to make a phone.
Sounds like Jeff Bezos and Amazon back in the day.
The problem we've seen with company like service branded phones is that they focus really on the services first and they put their user experience second. Yeah. And we've seen it fail many times before.
Amazon,
we saw the HTC,
Facebook,
the Facebook phone, that failed. The Amazon Fire phone was a flop.
Was it HTC first?
Yeah, HTC first.
Oh God, I had one of those for a while. Ugh, terrible. It just wasn't a good phone even standalone. Even if you put stock Android on it.
The ecosystem has changed a bit, and they're supposedly using technology they picked up from Smartisan. They're like a Chinese brand, and they actually make some really decent phones in China. I just never had a chance to use them.
Smartisan makes, remember Energizer launched all these phones?
Right.
Avenir, or whatever, that French company that makes Energizer phones.
Yeah, Avenir.
Avenir licenses Smartisan designs. Actually, if you look at all of the Energizer branded phones, they're just rebranded Smartisans. Mm-hmm. So Smartisan, which my friend Richard Light in Gadget always likes to rant and rave about. He actually more raves than rants about them. So he kind of hooked me up. Like he said, you should check it out. But of course, I don't have access to them. But when I'm in Hong Kong, visit him and stuff, he shows me, and it's cool. But that's the news. That's what we've got for you today. So a lot of kind of rah Qualcomm marketing, but well deserved, I think. And thanks to Don for being on, and thanks to you, Mishaal, for being on and bringing the voice of reason, the voice of XDA to the table. Do you want to tell people where they can find you on social and, also pimp your blog? And I mean, obviously, everybody knows XDA. If you're not knowing XDA and you listen to this podcast, come on, XDA Developers.
It's not really hard to find me. I'm not found on multiple different social media websites. You can just hit me up on Twitter at Mishaal Rahman, MishalRahman, and then that's pretty much the only social media that I use to tweet my thoughts. And I'm not going to clog your your Twitter feed up with my personal thoughts on politics or gaming or anything like that. So follow me if you want to see some news on occasion, I guess.
If you want to get some nerdy, and I'm not saying nerdy in a bad way because I'm a big nerd myself. If you want to see the nerdist take on the phone news, XDA Developers and Mishaal is your answer, I would say.
That's definitely true.
That's fair, right?
That's fair.
Okay. You know all the way to find me on the internets. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL on both Twitter and Instagram. So Twitter is where I post most of my announcements around the podcast. If you want to interact with me and comment on the podcast, since there's no commenting possibilities, it's audio podcast, go on Twitter and talk to me at Tankgirl. And then Instagram is where I put pretty pictures of things, phones. I like to take sexy pictures of devices and my travels. So check that out. There's also a YouTube channel that goes alongside the podcast. It's called just Miriam Jouar, like youtube.com/Miriam Jouar, my full name spelled out. You can find out how to spell my name by going to Twitter and looking at my name and spelling it out without a space. And you'll get unboxing videos, hands-on videos, sometimes reviews, but basically just videos that give you visuals to go along with the podcast. If you want to see a phone that we're talking about on the show, go to the YouTube channel. Chances are I'll have a video about that device. Also, if you stumbled upon the podcast by accident, you're like, this is cool, I want to listen to it again. mobiletechpodcast.com is the URL, so you'll find the RSS feed there. And if you don't know what I'm talking about and you're just using podcast apps, we're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Overcast, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, which is exciting. That's a pretty recent addition. So you can listen to the show there and subscribe there. I also want to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible.com is the platform for audiobooks. If you like books, but for some reason you're driving all day and you can't read a Kindle or read paper books, and you want to get your fix, Audible is the platform. They have the best selection of audiobooks. A lot of them are read by really great narrators, often the authors of the books themselves, which is really great. And, great selection. And generally a great platform. So the good news is that if you want to join Audible, there is a 30-day free trial in the show notes, and I'll give you the URL in a second, that lets you join Audible and get basically 30 days to try it out. It's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. So check out Audible, and I want to thank them for being our longtime sponsor. Thanks, Audible. And of course, thanks, Mishaal, for being on the show, and thanks, Don, earlier. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on, Miriam.
Absolutely. We'll have you on again sometime.
Hopefully.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then in the meantime, you know that we're going to do a show next week. So stay tuned for that, everyone. And cheers.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tankgirl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.